Thank you. Thanks so much. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I want to start, since we're in person, thank God, let's start with a bit of an experiment. Pretend you didn't hear that intro about me, and let's pretend that we met downstairs at the mingle hour or something, and I went up to you and put out my hand and said, "Hi, I'm Emily. I'm intelligent." Exactly, that's the reaction I wanted, exactly. I couldn't get that online when I gave this lecture. It's kind of laughable when someone introduces themselves as intelligent, and this is one of the problems with artificial intelligence. So we're gonna jump into the subject of designing for AI, and specifically managing user expectations when you start off with something quite loaded like that, being intelligent. Now, it's gonna be a lot of content to fly through in 30 minutes, so hang tight, you'll see a progress bar, that's your countdown to lunch at the top. So first, let's do a little credibility check. Just a little bit of background about me. You've already heard that I come from a background of art and psychology and design, and so I'll be referencing psychology a fair bit. I worked on AI first at Microsoft. Oh, did my microphone break out? Are we good? Oh, it's good. I first worked at Microsoft on Cortana, so a large enterprise. I then went to Context Scout. This was a seed stage startup with knowledge graph technology, and then Babylon Health, where it was AI focused on healthcare. Now I'm at Twilio, as mentioned before, as a director of product. Happy to chat with any of you about Twilio, but I won't be touching on their work today. What I will be focusing on is AI at various different size organizations, because a lot of folks can speak from artificial intelligence from the Googles and the Microsofts of the world, but I want to give all of you something to bring back and take home when it comes to what you learn about AI. Let's face it, first and foremost, you're here because AI is a bit of a buzzword now. We've talked about it a lot at this conference. It's a loaded term. That's why we all sort of laughed at the beginning, right? The problem with AI being a buzzword is that everybody thinks they need to do it, like it's a tick box. So I meet founders all the time that come to me and say, "How do we do AI?" Or, "Our company needs to start doing AI," as if it's not a tool to get to a solution. They just think it's a box they need to tick. And so I meet a lot of folks who are thinking of this. They're thinking of hiring data scientists, and that's a big part of it, and having the best engineers to code incredible algorithms, to lean into great machine learning practices. But as a few speakers have mentioned already, you can have the best code and the best technical capabilities, but if people don't know how to use it, it's gonna stay at this stage, and users won't get to work with it and be attracted to it. So for the purposes of this talk today, I want to give you a definition of artificial intelligence. A lot of people have different definitions, but I liked this one for a UX talk on AI. And it's that artificial intelligence is the broader concept of machines being able to carry out tasks in a way that we would think of as smart. So when we think about that, what makes us think something's smart? Well, I mentioned I have a background in psychology. So I like to lean into listening to psychological insights and ideas from my work the same way someone would study ergonomics, let's say, if they were doing furniture design. So if we lean into psychology, let's start with the question, if we think about artificial intelligence, well, what makes someone or something smart? How do we deem someone or something intelligent? What I did for this talk is break it into how we perceive humans as intelligent and how we perceive technology as intelligent. And I see it as a series of steps that we go through with other people and with technology. And that'll be the format for the first part of this talk today. What we're gonna do is read from left to right, starting off with humans, are they alive and awake with technology, does it respond to me? Then looking at competence, can it achieve basic tasks? And lastly, does it wow, does it delight me, does it impress me? And these things all need to happen in order for users to feel that something is intelligent. So let's start with the first column here. If any of you have children or nieces and nephews, as I do, you've probably gone to the beach and seen how kids interact with animals and wildlife. They sort of go, is it alive? Is it a shell or a hermit crab that's gonna move? This is what we try to find out when we encounter something new. We test it. We see if it responds to us. And this is the exact same thing that we do with all of our apps, with all AI. We start by testing it. We start by seeing, does it really work? Now, this may seem pretty obvious, right? It's pretty standard that people are going to test your products. But the number of times I work with companies where they've invested deeply into the back end, into the machine learning and the data science, but they haven't invested in great front-end developers, means that you might have something amazing that is still loading, and on the front end, nothing is responding to the click or the tap. And what a shame, because no one's gonna believe that that product is artificially intelligent if it doesn't respond to you. So though this seems like a small step, especially for a place like the Front-End Conference, it's critical to remember to champion your front-end engineers to make sure that things respond. Otherwise, no one's going to think your product is intelligent. So critical first step. The next aspect of this is competency. With humans, it's, can I ask you a basic question? And then it's with technology, it's, can you achieve basic tasks? So I'll give you another human example to start with. There was a university study where students in a class were broken into two groups. On the one hand, one group was told, you're going to evaluate the grade point average, or GPA, of the other half of your classmates. You don't have their test scores, you don't have anything to reference except recorded interviews. On the other hand, the other classmates gave video interviews where they spoke about their career aspirations. Those on video were evaluated on their intelligence just from that one interview. It's that first impression they were giving. What was interesting was that the students who on their video recordings looked at the ground or looked at the side and weren't very engaged, they were marked as having lower GPAs, lower grades. Whereas the students who were very engaged and paying attention did reflect that the other students thought that they did have higher GPAs. This didn't actually correlate. Eye contact didn't have anything to do with how well somebody took a test, but it was the perception of this. And it's important to call this out because I want all of you to think about how your apps come off and how they appear to people, because these first instances, these first impressions are critical, not just for the way humans relate, but for the way people interpret your technology and its capabilities and competence. I found this at my company Context Scout that I was at for a few years, where we were embedded in the browser. We had a 10 to win rule that we noticed from data, where we realized if in the first 10 websites someone visited, we didn't nail it every single time, if we faltered just once, we lost that user forever. We burned them, we disappointed them. And this is critical to remember when launching AI or any product, that you need to make sure you have those first impressions locked and that the tasks people want to do with your product, they can. Because otherwise they're not going to trust that it gets to that next level of intelligence. It's not even competent yet, so you can't oversell it. It's important for me to call out that these first two columns are really reflecting what I refer to as a stage when users are testing and evaluating your product. And the first impressions that they get from it are critical for how they perceive how much trust they have to do more with your product. There are good and bad sides to users testing your competence. On the one hand, you might be able to engage them. I met with users who had tried the first versions of Siri, and then when they tried Cortana, they went, wow, it doesn't sound like a robot, it's so engaging. We flipped them. We were able to engage them even more because their expectations were low, and we surpassed them. On the other hand, though, this can be when you lose users in these first two stages. For example, if you have a very simple reminder task that you ask an assistant, a voice assistant, let's say, to set a reminder for me to buy milk at the grocery store, and it fails and it doesn't work, why would you trust that same voice assistant, give it your credit card, and have it place an order for pizza for you? You probably think to yourself, well, it didn't work that other time with that simple task. I can't trust it to do this other thing. So this is what we need to be aware of with our users, is that they're looking for us to fail, and that's when you might lose their faith, and thus lose your usership with your product. The reason I mentioned setting expectations being key is that it's not just technology. Anyone who remembers this documentary on Netflix a few years ago about the Fire Festival knows what I'm talking about. If you missed it, a bunch of individuals bought tickets to a high-end music festival where they were promised cabanas and a glamorous life on the beach, and what they were given were rescue tents to stay in. Their expectations were so high for this celebrity-filled, wonderful event that when they showed up and got this, they were incredibly disappointed. Our goal is to make sure that we don't let this happen to our apps and our products. We don't want to sell a big, flashy thing if we can't deliver on it. And it's amazing how much this happens in tech. And so it's one of the reasons why I often push for a crawl, walk, run approach. I'm not the first one to talk about this concept. I'm sure many of you have heard of it before. But when I talk about a crawl, walk, run approach, it means letting users know what you can and can't do. At one of my companies, it was about letting them know that we were a customer support chatbot at first, before we were your all-encompassing healthcare assistant, and starting small and building up. This can be hard, though, because I know a lot of us work with startups, and oftentimes you want to promise things. You want to say, yes, we're running here, we're doing this. But don't be afraid to do things like putting a beta tag on your product and setting those expectations and saying, you know what, we're not there yet. But thank you for being an early adopter. Thank you for trying this product, and we will get there together. This is our mission, but this is where we are. Remember that and be honest with your users because they deserve that and otherwise they will abandon your product. There's different ways that you can set expectations. At Babylon Health, we were a healthcare assistant and you could chat essentially with our chatbot to diagnose your conditions or, sort of diagnose. We made it clear twice as we started the conversation that we were not a clinician and if you needed real medical help, you should pursue it. This is a safe way of doing this and there's several ways to set expectations and this was one that worked for us at the time. If you don't set expectations, you'll have what happened to my team when we launched Cortana. We started off by saying, ask me anything. So if you've been paying attention so far, you probably know how that went. Ask me anything was like a challenge to our users. We almost said, bring it on, ask us anything you want. Our default fallback was to search Bing. So for some users, that was actually disappointing because they did try asking anything and we said, how about a Bing search? And so the company adjusted, and I appreciate that the new design shows type here to search. That is more realistic. It doesn't promise the world, but it does accurately explain what's going to happen after you type and click and hit enter, what you can get back. And that's good for our users. That means you won't burn them and disappoint them. And that's exactly what you should be doing with your products, even if it's not as exciting as ask me anything. Now, this may be the point in the talk where you're going, oh, what a downer. This is all about artificial intelligence, and all we're talking about is putting on beta tags and what we can't do. But hey, we're designers, right? Like we love constraints. So I'm gonna show you how you can use technological constraints as inspiration for your designs, because that's what we do. That's what we do best. We've been talking about hex codes and the limited number of colors on the web. We like constraints. So let's talk about constraints for AI and design. Anyone who's not familiar with knowledge graph technology, this is as visual an explanation as I can try and give you. It's a series of concepts that are interrelated by shared themes. And for my company, it was a knowledge graph based on the web. And what that meant is that some of these modules would come and go because the websites would go down, things would be posted and added. It was a fluid, changing knowledge graph that we had to work with. So that meant that the company I worked for, we were building software to help folks build knowledge about employees they were researching, sort of like recruitment software. And it meant that this individual on the right-hand side, we had different information on him depending on the day and the time. So as designers, how do we manage the fact that we don't always know what information we're going to get back? It's a bit of a mystery. Well, we decided to lean into it. And instead of having a rigid menu, when we discovered something on the web, we popped it forward like a little piece of discovery. And it was exciting and delightful, and it was nice, and a nice way to show what we'd learned and what we'd found out. And so this is one way to lean into the capabilities of your technology and the shortcomings of your technology, to take it as a moment to have some inspiration. What we found in the end was that users were delighted as they did their work and they researched on LinkedIn, information popped forward that was helpful for them, rather than showing, gee, we didn't find this or we didn't find that. Take that as a source of inspiration and think about what is your code capable of doing and sit with your engineers. I can't emphasize this enough. Learn from them. Understand the code, understand what it can't do when it's going to break, and you too can form a design based on your constraints. All right, so now I'm getting back to this table again. We haven't yet talked about those delightful moments of what's really intelligent. We've just been nailing competency and setting expectations. So let's get into this third column. When it comes to our users' perceptions of technology being smart, I've grouped it into two camps, and I'll walk you through some examples right now. The first camp is imitating human behavior. It's what we all think of when we think of AI. It's telling jokes in an actual funny way that we think are actually entertaining. It's the humanoid robots that haunt our dreams and are a little bit scary. It's the moments that are very small. Maybe it's not a whole lifelike person, but maybe it's a code and a piece of technology going, when you're on the phone with someone. If anyone hasn't heard of this example, that's the Google Assistant calling on the behalf of someone and responding in small, nuanced ways that seem quite human. And that's delightful and makes us sort of smile. But it's important to remember that artificial intelligence and a lot of the work that many of us will do falls into the second category of providing unique value. This is an example of Watson Health's dashboard. That is of major value for healthcare workers. Or maybe some of you have used this feature that's really more machine learning in your inbox in terms of suggesting responses and replies. This is everywhere now. Or maybe it's what I was referring to. Our recruiting software helped show people the general themes of where people work without them having to read their entire page. We gave them that intelligence and insights in half a second we could load. That saves them time. So I think it's important to remember that, okay, it's not all going to be humanoid robots, but winning moments can be big and small, but really they're in the eyes of your users. For our healthcare users, letting them know that they might have tonsillitis after they went through a chatbot survey was really helpful for them and got them along to a good path. I love this other app in the UK called Clio, where they manage your money. They really leaned into the design knowing what was important to their users. This conversation was about how much have I saved this week. So they really celebrated those $12. That's exciting. That's a really fun thing to save that amount of money if you're their customers and their users. So think about what's important. Think about what pieces of intelligence are meaningful to your users and lean into that. So I want you all to be able to go back to your workplaces or wherever you are and be able to manage that question, how do we do AI, which is just wrong in so many ways. Well, you can explain that there are some lessons for both large and small companies. First and foremost, set expectations appropriately. Claiming intelligence, you need to go above and beyond the bar that you set, so be aware of that. And by doing that, you can do a few things well. You can scope, and what I mean by that is especially for startups, get scenario focused. Pick whether you're in healthcare or finance and decide what type of intelligence you want to provide. Don't try to boil the ocean. Don't try to do everything. It's nearly impossible. When you think about artificial intelligence, if you're going to lean into the personification side, just use voice only if your scenario, devices, and environment all support it. I've spoken to companies who said, we've got this great idea for a voice scenario and we'll use it on the factory floor. That's a pretty noisy place. It's likely to be too loud to work. So think like a UX designer when you think about artificial intelligence and think, are we really set up to succeed in this environment or with these types of devices? And personify only if it's helpful. At Babylon, as a healthcare company, we weighed this back and forth a fair bit of knowing that we needed you to speak to us about intimate health details. Does it help or hurt for us to be personified, for us to be a little human-like, to get that insight from you? And these are things you should evaluate with your teams as well. Sometimes what this means is you need to build rails into the experience. This was a mock-up one of the members of my team made when they wanted to show how Spanglish would perform. In the United States, sometimes in the South, you'll see a mix of Spanish and English used. And we needed to make sure that our chatbot, which is usually set to one language or another, could manage that. And so we used chips, which is now a very standard common practice everybody's seen, to keep users on the path. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but that's just one example. When it comes to intelligence also, I just want to note, do not be this guy. I'm not sure if people know Ron Swanson from the show Parks and Rec. He's a great character, but he does go around saying, I know more than you. I know this and I know that. And so knowing that people are going to be skeptical, like you all were when I started off with, hi, I'm intelligent, try to be helpful. Try to be a useful artificial intelligence, rather than something that's a bit of a jerk like this. And how do we do that? Well, to me, I like to think about good intelligence and bad intelligence. And this is my own point of view. You can take it or leave it. But I believe good intelligence and artificial intelligence makes users feel smart and competent, makes them feel like superheroes at their jobs or their productivity or their tasks. It also saves them time and effort. I was showing some examples from B2B scenarios. The amount of time those people got back, they felt like rock stars for it. And also lets them use their brains for what they do best. I think Sarah spoke about this in her lecture about how people like work and they enjoy doing work. So I often meet with folks that work for customer support teams, and I assure them we are not here to take all of your jobs, because I personally believe that AI should not do everything. I really think that humans want to use their brains for what's interesting and challenging. So when I speak to customer support reps, I ask them, what's your least favorite part of your day? And it's answering the same questions 100 times with very simple, basic answers. The favorite part of their day isn't going home and not working. It's answering the really complicated questions of a customer is traveling abroad, forgot their medication, and doesn't have bandwidth for a video call. Oh, and where's the nearest pharmacy? That's a complex problem. Artificial intelligence can handle, what's my insurance number? You know, who do I call? Let AI do that stuff. Let individuals use their brains to be the thoughtful and knowledgeable people that they really are. Bad intelligence, pretty obvious. It makes users feel stupid. It lets them know that they've failed in some way. They asked for the command or the prompt wrong. So it doesn't give them help when they're stuck. It doesn't take that utterance that wasn't quite what we were expecting when we built the product and doesn't give them help or chips or anything to get them back into the flow of working with the AI. And it doesn't save any time. There's a lot of things that are created just to be gimmicks and just to be interesting. And for me, the real value is artificial intelligence that helps us do our jobs. What I often like to show is a visual to explain when you embark on this work where you're going to find yourself. No matter how hard you try, this will happen. We think we have managed our users' expectations, and we have this yellow box of what we can answer. Whether it's a voice assistant or a chatbot in conversational AI, we think we've got this, but our users always have a bigger fence of what artificial intelligence has promised them that we can do. So it's about managing that fence and getting them back on track and keeping those users in that yellow space so that they can be successful. Because the yellow is what we've solved for and designed for. What users think we can answer might fall outside of that. So it's our job to constantly manage those perceptions and expectations and make sure that that all fits into one. Helping users find the edges. I've spoken to you about a few different ways we do that when it came to upfront, letting them know we are not a doctor, or being scenario focused and scoped, but you need to think about this in the process as well. Error handling when it comes to voice assistants is one of the most common tasks that you do. So I'll take an example from the UK. I heard a lecture from the BBC team, and I thought this was a brilliant example of how to manage and get people back on track. They had an Alexa skill that worked for children. It was all about children playing a voice game with different characters. And so in this voice game, children aren't like all of us. They get excited and they just wanted to answer the voice assistant. They didn't wait for it to finish what it was saying. So their first example was, who would you like to play with? Bob and Jane are here. I'm making up the character names. The children using the product in the prototype and the user research study, after hearing who would you like to play with, shouted out SpongeBob. And that's, even I know that's not a BBC character. So the designers thought, oh my God, how are we gonna manage these kids that just shout things out? Well, they set expectations at the start of the query, and they started off with, Bob and Jane are here. Who would you like to play with? I thought that was a brilliant example of how along the process, you can set users' expectations and let them know what you can and can't do. So these are the things that we need to do. You're not done just because you set expectations in the beginning. It's gonna happen throughout use of your artificial intelligence product. Also, let's just take a note, have fun with it. I appreciated that knowing users were going to challenge our products, we made sure to build in jokes and funny sayings and responses when we built Cortana. So for example, we knew that because it was a personified female voice, that there would be people asking Cortana to be their girlfriend. So we can lean into that and have Cortana say, okay, but we'll need a plan. I'll work on being more human, you work on being more digital. She's in on the joke, right? That's the idea. And we also showed that we knew your region by understanding jokes that fit for certain areas. So this was a joke that we wrote for our India market. And it was important for us to give a nod to, yes, we know you're testing us and evaluating us, and here's what we have to offer. So be aware of that evaluation stage at the beginning of your product's use early on with your users, and be ready to have some moments where you can go, aha, I know what you're doing there, and have some surprises for them in the product. When having fun, if you're gonna go with something personified, think of the humanity of it. I'm gonna come back to this example because I think it's great to not just wait for someone to ask you a joke, but to, without them asking for it, drop in little moments of magic and delight. Whether it's saying, or it's doing something else that you're showing users we're a bit personified and a bit human. So I'm gonna summarize minimum intelligence. First, do a few things very well. Do not expect to be intelligent before you're smart. Don't start running if you're still in crawl phase. Set expectations early, often, and throughout your product use, and surprise users with intelligence that suits your scenario. Now, we're done, right? Everybody's hungry. I know we want to go to lunch, but not quite, because we had a little bit more time today. I realized I'd been doing this lecture and stopping at that point as if we're done. We're finished with AI, but no. AI, conversational chatbots, voice assistants, these are not things that you can set and forget. And frankly, most things in tech are not, but especially these. The reason for that is so far I've been talking to you about bringing your users to you, right? Getting your users into that yellow space of this is what we can do, let me set their expectations. But if we're really gonna be good practitioners in this space, we also need to go to our users. And so when we think about growing what we know, what we can answer, what we can do, it's about thinking about what do our users want from us and how are they using our product. So if you want to know how they're using your product, designers, meet your new best friends, your analytics, your business insights, and whomever else may wear this hat at your company, the folks that see and know the data about how users are interacting with your chatbot or with your voice assistant. They're your best friends because you're going to have regular meetings, or you should anyway, if you launch a chatbot or an assistant weekly, where you look at where are we failing? Where have we not had an answer? Where have we dropped an error message? And are there common themes? You might have thought that the query, show me my calendar, is what users will ask. And in time, through research, you'll find that when's my next meeting is actually what people are asking because it's more natural. And you should adjust to them. You should have a meeting in the middle, basically, as I showed that square before. It's also important to know that you're not just going to have to wait for your users to come to you, but the knowledge you need to exhibit will change over time. We found at Microsoft that at Christmas time, lots of people wanted to ask, where is Santa Claus right now? And of course, in the springtime at a healthcare company, what are the symptoms of hay fever allergies? Was one of the most common things. And let me tell you about coronavirus. That was a lot of queries we had to update. But it's important to remember that you can predict some of this. Lean on your marketing partners as well at your companies. They're used to using content calendars and understanding the seasonality of our customers' interests. So lean into that knowledge and get their help as well when you build in this space. So, in summary, what we've covered today is about setting expectations, doing a few things well, adding delightful moments, and remembering that you're never finished. This is a piece of work that will grow with you and your companies over time. So I hope you've had fun learning about it. I would love to chat further about artificial intelligence. That's it. Thanks.
Hi. Thank you, Emily. That was awesome. We have some questions.
Sounds great. Yeah. Great.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go for it. Yeah.
First question is a little pushback, I guess.
Oh, good. All right.
In your experience, I guess in light of this Google.
Yeah. Yeah. That.
In your experience, should AI mimic human or natural behavior as close as possible, the user not even realizing, or should it be transparent that it's AI?
I'm always going to be a fan of transparency. I don't see why we should be tricking our users. Like all of my comments were about AI being useful and of service to us. I think personification has its place in the right time and place. So individuals, let's say, who won't be comfortable going for professional counseling, there will be a lot of folks that will open up to a chatbot in ways you would understand, or a voice assistant in ways that they wouldn't feel comfortable doing with another human facing them. So that personification can nudge them towards human interactions in some ways, which is my belief, that we can use personification to ease them into more human contact. But do I think it should be calling up people and tricking them? No. I don't think personification is helpful in those scenarios. And so that's why I was saying personify when it helps the work you're doing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is a question from David Erne.
Nice.
Hi, Dave. All the way from Freeport. Your marketing person probably wants to sell your AI as being as awesome as possible.
Of course.
How do you sell this under-promise and over-deliver approach to them?
That's a hard one. These are the people you're going to fight with for beta tags and things like that in your product. And also startups going for investment money. It's a tough one, but for me, the fallback has always been, do we want to burn our users or not? Do you want a steady increasing chain of users adopting and adopting and adopting? Or do you want people to try it and go, no? That's what's going to happen if you overpromise and they go, it doesn't work at all. No one's coming back to it. So a lot of the things I spoke about in this talk of, if it's not smart at first, no one's going to believe it's intelligent. That's what I say to them, to kind of shoot that down.
Yeah, good point.
That's a good question.
In their education, how should designers be trained for working with AI?
Ooh, great question. I lean on my background in psychology a lot, as you probably heard throughout the talk. So I think understanding human behavior, understanding what humans expect of other humans is a great way to approach artificial intelligence. But I can't underscore enough, do deep machine learning projects with engineers. Sit with them. Some of my best experience was working with the PhDs at Carnegie Mellon's software engineering schools and just sitting and learning what they do, because it taught me the constraints I had to work within. So I'd say psychology and engineering coursework to understand a little bit more would be helpful.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Some new questions are popping up.
Keep them coming.
I have to vet them in my head really quickly.
That's fair.
What is the main added value of today's AI in your experience?
Automation and efficiency. I see some, especially in the B2B scenario space, and also in my personal life, I walk around dictating messages sometimes. When I see these things, you feel a bit superpowered, right? It speeds up your workday and it cuts out some of that boring work. So for me, that's what I'm really excited about, is when we're cutting out repetitive, boring, copy and paste kind of tasks. That's the really exciting stuff for me.
What if you're OCD and you really enjoy that stuff?
If you enjoy that stuff, leave the AI aside, that's fine. And there's personas for every type, right?
Where is AI in 10 years?
Ooh, I can tell you what I hope. Hopefully you all will help build this. I want AI to help us be like superheroes with capes. And I want the AI to be that cape sort of fluttering behind us, keeping us afloat, but giving us all the credit, right? I want us all to be superheroes in our own ways, and I want artificial intelligence to supplement the work we do and help us. Whether it's in business, whether it's in our personal life, being more on time, more punctual, helping us plan fun things. Yeah, have it enable the fun we want. Yeah.
Nice, nicely said.
Yeah.
Couple more here. Let's see. How do you know if AI is the right solution for you? How do you argue that it might not be the right solution?
It's a great question. I'd say think about a few things. Is there a reason to personify, to have natural language, to have voice or chat? There are many times where it takes too long to write out something. We would joke about scenarios. We would never try to replace Photoshop with artificial intelligence because you do want to slide that little slider back and forth and adjust it. So don't take that tool away from people and give them a longer one of value increase, value decrease, that'd be terrible. That'd be awful. So there are some things that it just doesn't suit the scenario. But if you can automate, great. And if it's something that can't really be automated, let humans do it. There's a reason that we should be doing those things. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Final question. What is a good way to get out of a stuck conversation? Fallback, for example, Cortana opening Bing.
I'd say keeping folks on the rails. With Cortana and Bing, it's a tricky one, right? Because there was a real reason to fall in that search at times. But when most of us will be working at companies where we don't have a search engine to fall back on. So then it's about having follow-ups, giving them chips and suggestions, telling them what you can do. The Mercedes voice assistant does a good job at this because it displays what you can say and it says a few things. So I just say it's all about error handling. I don't have a perfect, I think I could do 30 minutes just on how to handle errors in voice assistants. But find creative ways, find ways to suggest different things, let them know what you can do. And at times you might just have to fall back and say, I can't really answer that. It does happen sometimes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Emily Sappington.
Thank you.